for, as that was 25 through 21. We're going to get through 20 through 16 and then come back to this page because we have a lot of teams to cover. It's an extravaganza, guys. Extravaganza. I don't know why we do these lists, but it's just what we do. We like getting things right. We know a ball. We know a ball. Number 20, Michigan. Run more into his second season here, there at Ann Arbor. They have some things moving around for at least coaches. New offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey comes in from North Carolina, as again there was a lot of shuffling over there at Chapel Hill. He comes in. New co-offensive coordinator Steve Kaslusa. I think I pronounced that right. He was the interim OC last season. He's now the co-OC. And then the other moves, obviously there's going to be a new quarterback because the quarterback play last year was literally making the Wolverines completely one-dimensional. They should have that extra element that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Running backs that leave, you have Edwards and Mullings. Mullings was more of the guy, even though Edwards was on the cover of College Football 25 last season. Wasn't cover worthy, I guess, of a season. Those two guys are gone. You also lose your amazing tight end, Colston Loveland, to the NFL. Just a great asset last season. He was bailing out Michigan. He was the only guy bailing him out through the air. Just an absolute stud. It's unfortunate that he is gone now. And then obviously there's a shuffle. Will Johnson, who had that awesome interception I was talking about on Mikey Keene, who's now a Wolverine for Michigan, as now we get into the key players. Let's start with the defense, because the defense is what and why Michigan's going to win a lot of games this season, and they're at number 20. The linebacker core, Barham and Haasman, those are the guys that we see on the screen there. Those are the reasons and the glue that's going to put it all together. At defensive end, Derek Moore, who is an absolute stud. He had a stellar game against Alabama in that Requilance, or however you pronounce that, Reliance Bowl against the Crimson Tide. He was just a menace in the rain there for Jalen Milroe. It's going to be a menace this season. Again, he might be the guy that is a standout. We brought up that in the game preview for Ohio State versus Michigan. Michigan has not been sacking Buckeye quarterbacks. He might be the guy that does that. At defensive back, we got Rod Moore, Hill, and Barry. They're at defensive backs, coming to be key players in locking down a lot of teams, and why this team will be winning a lot of games for this 4-2-5 defense. There's some other transfers coming in that might be big. The Metcalf twins, or Metcalf brothers at least. I'm not too sure if they're twins. They come in from Arkansas. You got Trey Williams in that defensive line. I totally forgot about the legends that I didn't even mention there in the changes. At defensive tackle, you got Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. How can I don't have them in my notes. It's fine. I got a lot of teams that I went through. But yeah, Trey Williams, who comes in from Clemson, solid defensive tackle, who should be solid in a Michigan Wolverine uniform. I don't know if he's going to be able to... I can't explain to you guys, you got Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. That was a generational defensive line in the trenches. Like, they helped win them a national championship a couple of seasons ago. And the reason why they beat Ohio State last year, they shut down the Buckeyes so well, and a lot of other great teams. But Michigan in the trenches should be all right. They're just not going to be as stellar as they have been in the years past. But they do have a lot coming back. Obviously, linebacker core and a lot of DBs. But then on the offense, big guy coming in, Justice Haynes. Probably underused there in Tuscaloosa. Unfortunately, the offensive system that they had to use was like Milroe, empty sets. Haynes was, not that he was barely on the field, but when he was on the field, he just didn't get enough touches. That's why he left Alabama and is now with Michigan. Is their run-heavy team. He's like, I want to run the ball, coach. I'm out of here. I want to go to a run-heavy team. Jerome Moore got one of the biggest pickups. He was the #1 running back in the portal. And then he also has Marshall, who had a pretty productive game against Alabama in last season's finale, which they did win. And then they have some key guys in the offensive line. At center, you have Crippen, left guard El Hadi, and that left tackle Link. Those guys are returners. Toughest games. Back to this slide. They got 5. Okay, just 5. Just 5. Week 2 on the road against Oklahoma. Yeah, if they don't win that game, totally understandable because of the quarterback situation that they are in at the moment. Week 4, they go to Lincoln to take on the Cornhuskers. Tough one. That might, I mean, if they drop those 2 games, this is gonna be a bad year, I think. Because then you got USC on the road. They got to go to Southern California. I think once again last year. No, they did. I'm pretty sure they didn't go to UCLA. Regardless, they got to go to the LA Coliseum. Week 8, they have UW. Last year was technically a rematch of the national championship. Obviously, it's a totally different Washington team from the Kalen DeBoer, Penix lethal attack. But they do have a decent quarterback there, and Desmond Williams, and then a couple of other pieces as well. Boston at wide receiver. I believe it's Coleman at running back. But it should be a pretty good test later in the season for Jedd Fisch. There's a lot of good things I'm hearing from that team and program. They do obviously lose Stephen Belichick, who we talked about for the North Carolina at number 25. Week 14, the game, they got to host Ohio State. Can they make it 5 in a row against the Buckeyes? That would be a huge game and have a massive impact. I think this year, especially if they don't drop games, especially it's shown more second season, should have a different approach on offense. He's obviously made the changes at coordinator to make it a little bit more spicy and scoring some points. We'll see if it works. We're thinking 9-3, 8-4, but if they can get to 10 wins, this is definitely a playoff team. But they're just like right outside the outskirts of being a playoff team. I think this season, it's going to be like 2026, 2027, and I think that the 2026 quarterback battle is going to be just as crazy as this past season, because it got Brady Schmeigel coming in from Newberry Park. He's probably going to be a generational quarterback. I think even better than Bryce Underwood. Weaknesses for Michigan: quarterback play, wide receiver production. I mean, it was a problem last year, made them one-dimensional. I mean, they didn't even blow out a lot of teams in the year that they won the national championship, but they did blow out some teams. Not a lot. If they want to, get those for sure wins, especially on the road in Lincoln, on the road in Norman, LA, you got to have some good quarterback play. I'm leaning and saying just get Mikey Keene on the field, please. Just get Mikey Keene on the field. He just adds an extra element. I mean, he's a baller. He's beaten UCLA. He's beaten Purdue. A stellar quarterback who finally gets a chance at a big program. They also got Jake Garcia from East Carolina. He's a travel or journeyman quarterback that's been at quite a lot of different programs. I don't think he's going to get, unless someone goes down that's either not Mikey Keene, or if it goes down that's Mikey Keene or Bryce Underwood, or if one of those two guys struggle. And then the wide receiver production. They do not have a wide receiver in their depth chart that had more than 150 yards, and that's guys coming from the portal. Yeah, that's just got to happen. And then there's no tight end. Loveland, he's gone. So the tight end play, you're not going to have that outlet. Might be the thing that holds Michigan back. Not once again, but if they do pass it more, which I mean in the game against Ohio State, they threw an interception. So when they throw the ball, it's kind of a risk for the Wolverines, unfortunately. But they're at 20. Their physical defense, physical offensive line, they should be winning a lot of games just because of those elements. Then we move to Rocky Top. Good old Rocky Top. Knoxville for Tennessee at number 19. Josh Heupel, another year for the offensive guru, I would say. I really love his offense. The changes for the Volunteers. Yeah, we lose a great running back in Samson, who carried a lot of the load in the offensive production last season. You lost Nico Iamaleava, who was another offseason headline story that was going around. He ends up at UCLA. Actually, kind of, as the season has now gotten to us, I'm kind of excited to watch Nico in a Bruins jersey. I was just disappointed that he was going to go, play for the Vols. It would have been a great season. They would have been a favorite, not to win the SEC, but to get to the playoff again and then, maybe make a splash. Tennessee does lose their top 3 wide receivers. Thornton and McCoy, I believe they're NFL bound, and then Squirrel White, who transfers over to Florida State. It's unfortunate that they lose those top 3 guys. And then in the offensive line, they lose Spraggins, Mays, and Campbell. Mays and Campbell were just staples in the offensive line. It's going to be some big losses. And then at defensive end, Pierce Jr. didn't have a crazy stat line, but just when you have just an athlete, just a menace like Pierce Jr. was, it just makes teams go away from him. And then they also have to think about him when they're passing it, because there's just was a great edge rusher. Was an absolute nightmare in Norman for Oklahoma and Jackson Arnold in that game last season. I just have those just in my head of him getting those sacks. Those are the changes for Tennessee that we're going to talk about. The key players for this veer and shoot offense. Joey Aguilar, who I think was named the starter yesterday as from being live today, comes in from Appalachian State. Technically, it was kind of a weird move because Nico left where Joey went. He was a UCLA Bruin for 2 seconds, and then now he's a Tennessee Volunteer. I think Josh Heupel's system is just a great plug-and-play system where really any quarterback can come into and just be stellar. You saw it with Joe Milton. I'm forgetting the guy before Milton. Just every quarterback he's had here in Knoxville has just been a solid guy. Ile Maliava might not have been a difference maker against elite opponents, but games that Tennessee should be winning, Joey Aguilar is going to be that guy that get him over those humps. Brazel the second at wide receiver is returning. He was a transfer from Tulane. He should be stepping up into those top 3 spots. At wideout, at running back, I know they lost Samson, and a lot of people were like, especially on social media, the Tennessee offense was just Samson. I'm like, well, Samson, a great offensive line that we talked about, and then they had 3 solid wide receivers gone. But you have now Bishop and a transfer in from Duke who might be the new Samson. That's Thomas. I don't have his first name down. Forgot to put that there. But Thomas, sorry. Solid guy for Duke. Should be another solid guy for Tennessee. At the offensive line, we talked about losses, but dude, Tennessee did some work in the offseason, in the portal, and in recruiting. You see there, number 70, Saunders Jr. He's going to be starting at right tackle, a true freshman. He's going to be one of the few true freshmen in the top 25 that's going to be a starter in any position. And he has been if you don't dabble into the recruiting realm like I do, he's just been the talk of town in terms of offensive linemen. He was just a big commodity that a lot of the SEC programs were trying to get. Tennessee gets him, most likely because he was going to be a starter day one. They also have at right guard Moe Jr. who comes in from Arizona. He was a solid starter there for the Wildcats. Great pickup for Heupel there in the trenches. Pendleton, another Notre Dame lineman coming in from the portal. Indiana got Coogan. Well, Tennessee gets Pendleton, who should be solid for them at left guard. And then a 5-star recruit, or former 5-star recruit at left tackle, Hurd, who was a transfer last season from LSU. Just another, I think, solid offensive line. And the reason why Bishop and Thomas are going to have a good time finding running lanes, even Joey Aguilar, who is a pretty mobile quarterback, should find some big runs from him as well this season. On the defensive side of the ball for the 4-2-5 defense, a pretty solid linebacker core. You got Carter and Telander coming back. Defensive end, who had, I think, a little bit more production from Pierce versus Pierce Jr., but that's because, I mean, like, you're running to the opposite side, really. And, the blanket that caught a lot of that is Joseph at defensive end. Should be another stellar guy. Nose tackle Eason should be another guy that just sacrifices for the defense in that linebacker core to get a lot of tackles and maybe some tackles for loss. And really why Tennessee's in the top 20 is this defensive back unit. You got McCoy, Turpentine, Gibson the second, and Carter all returning, who had pretty good numbers last season. McCoy had that amazing one-handed interception in the red zone against Alabama. That was one of the reasons why Tennessee beat the Crimson Tide last season. Got that guy coming back, and along with those others, Tennessee's defense probably gonna, set up the offense with an excellent field position with some turnovers in their opponent's territory. That's the reason why Tennessee is going to win a lot of games. The tough games for the Volunteers for 2025. Week 3, they got Georgia. Why you gotta give Georgia, or why do you gotta give them Georgia so early in the season? This is a matchup that hasn't happened in September in about a while. Usually this game's later on down the line for the Volunteers, but it's going to be a good test for them to see how legitimate they are going to be. Week 8. That's how far we got to go back for another tough game, and that's in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. I mean, if those are the two games for sure that they're going to lose, I would not bat an eye. I would be like, okay, that's understandable for Tennessee to lose. But there's another tough game that's in the Swamp against Florida. That's week 13. They should not be losing that game, but they might. They just might. And it is what it is. We're thinking 8-4. But you're like, what? 8-4? Where's the 4? It's going to be a random team, we think. But also might be 9-3. It's just the offense. Is the offense going to score enough points to win games? That's going to be the big issue. And running back efficiency. Obviously, you lose Sampson, Thomas, and Bishop should be the guys. But, again, how is this all going to gel early in the season? They have that week 1 game against Syracuse at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium there in Atlanta to open up the season in a neutral site field. And then again, you have the early tests against Georgia. Man, it's going to be a good season, I think, for Tennessee football still. You lose Nico. I think Nico kind of gets you into playoff contention. You lose him. Aguilar is like, it's more of a coin toss, which is not bad. It's 50-50. Like, if you're a Volunteers fan, you're like, hey guys, you're going to lose Nico, but you might make the playoffs. I think that's not too bad of a thing to look at, I guess. So yeah, number 19, Tennessee. Iowa State, number 18. When I was making this list, I had them a little bit higher, and then there was like the last minute change that I made, moved them back. Maybe I should have moved them back a little bit more, but it is what it is. I just like Matt Campbell. He's just a grinder. He's been a grinder since his days at Toledo. I really like this head coach. He's really growing on me. The changes for the Cyclones. Big losses at the wide receiver core. Higgins and Knoll. Those guys move on to the NFL. Defensive line pieces. You lose Peterson, Singleton, and I'm going to mispronounce this one, but I got to learn how to say it because he plays for Texas A&M now. On Yendim. And I think I actually said that right. He's playing for the Aggies. He transfers out. But those are, some big guys. They still have Orange, who we're going to talk about here for key players. The linebacker core, you lose your top two linebackers in Ebel, and then Ellis, who was a kind of a surpriser. He just moves on to Colorado State. One of those moving down kind of things, but I'm not too sure. Maybe Iowa State fans can tell me why that all happened. That was kind of one of the surprising ones. It was you guys have a guy that's already at Iowa State getting a lot of snaps, but then he goes to Colorado State. Maybe there's something in the water there in Ames that he didn't like the taste of. And then also at defensive back positions, Frailer and Verdon. Two solid guys. I think Verdon definitely is in the NFL. Frailer, I think, is not. He might be a free agent at the moment. But those are the big changes for Iowa State. As we go into the key players for this offense, Rocco Beck. The reason why this team is ranked, obviously, there's a pretty veteran offensive line in front of him as well. We're not going to talk about a little bit more about them. Unfortunately, on Wednesday, they were just outside the top 25 offensive lines for 2025. But he has his two running backs, Hansen and Sama, the second. Two solid guys that are going to be carrying a lot of the load and should make it a little bit easier to pass the ball and open things up. He has one of his top end targets, not the top. He wasn't Higgins, he wasn't Knoll, but Sowell. He'll be back this season, and I think a guy that'll get a lot more touches, maybe some more touchdowns. You saw it there in the intro, Burkell. He's going to be, I think, a guy this season for Iowa State. And then you have, again, that veteran offensive line, very experienced. Right tackle, you got Miller. Center, you got Black. Left guard, you have Barrett, who switching around. I think it was Black and Barrett who now are playing different positions or swap positions. And then at left tackle, you have Neal the third. Pretty veteran offensive line. It's just, can they do it against, a really top end Big 12 team? And then again, they have the game against Iowa that we talked about in our top 10 non-conference games. On the defensive side of the ball, this team surprisingly is one of the best in the secondary. Just like BYU, instead of being interceptions and turnovers, it's actually just passing yards. They just shut down teams through the air. And they have Cooper and Williams in that secondary that was, again, one of the top end ones coming back, and a few others. And then at defensive tackle, Orange, he's going to be a big body in there to make things happen for the linebacker core of Bacon and McLaughlin. Those guys had some decent numbers. Now they're stepping up into starting roles, most likely, getting most of the snaps. Obviously, there's going to be rotations, fatigue during games, but those guys should be on the field most of the time for the Cyclones. And why we have the reason for those key players at number 18, and obviously Rocco Beck. I think he's going to be a bigger difference maker. He was just shut down in the Big 12 game. Unfortunately, if they would have won that, they would have been in a college football playoff team. But we'll see this season if they can make some noise for their toughest games, and we'll get into their weaknesses right after that. Toughest game, we're doing that watch along this Saturday. Hopefully you come in and tune in with us. At least consider it, guys. Maybe come in for 30 minutes. Talk to me in the chat for a little bit. We'll get into some more other games going on for week 1. That's kind of going to be a big fun thing happening here on the Rumble platform. Week 2, another big game for Iowa State, and that's against Iowa. That one's at home. They got the sneaky win in Iowa City last year. Can they make it 2 in a row? If they do, watch out for the Cyclones, because they don't have another big game really until I think week 9, which they have a bye before, and that's against BYU, another ranked team here at your Sports Outpost. They have that bye against a team that's going to be very physical. Can they match that physicality? It's going to be a big question for Iowa State this year. week 10, back-to-back weeks of tough games. That's against Arizona State, team that they lost to in the Big 12 championship game, and that was because they lost in the trenches, and they had amazing wide receivers, but guess what? Arizona State's defensive backs were way better, unfortunately, and they shut down Rocco Beck, Higgins, and Noel. Just was not even close. And then there was turnovers alongside that. It was a debacle, unfortunately, there in Dallas. Will it be a debacle in Ames? Probably not. I think that's going to be a close game and another tough one for Matt Campbell and company. Week 11. I think this is the toughie. The toughie. They got to go to Fort Worth. Down against TCU, who should be a team that is renewed a little bit more competitive. They lost some close games that were just heartbreakers last season. And that should be a tough one against TCU for this team. And, we have them there at 18. Initially, I think in our previews, I had them at 7-5 just because I just didn't go deep enough. And as I gotten deeper, I'm like, okay, actually, this team has a lot more coming back than what I thought initially. So we're about 8-4, 9-3, which is, Big 12 conference champion game worthy. It's just, can you beat those key teams in the Big 12, so it allows you to participate in that contest again. And then if you get that game against Iowa, we're definitely talking about them maybe being the one of those two maybe for the Big 12 that they get. Again, when we get to the bold predictions at the end of this extravaganza, we'll talk a bit more about the playoff. Not my predictions of all the 12 teams in it, but what might go down. The weaknesses. We talked about key players for the linebackers, but they might not have the depth. So we're talking about consistency for the linebacker core. I think is going to be the weakness, which is a big part of the field that they got to cover. I know they do lose those guys at the defensive line, but I think they might be able to replace some of those guys. Matt Campbell, pretty good recruiter, actually a stellar developer at players. You can't really doubt the guy in that because he had his time at Toledo and he was doing that and getting big wins for the Rockets, and he's gonna, I think, continue to do that with the Cyclones. It just, how does he do that? And I think that one of the big issues they gotta have is consistency, because if Bacon and McLaughlin come off the field, you're gonna have some issues probably. So that was number 18. Now we are into number 17, Ole Miss. And it's another season for Lane Kiffin, and it was a big transition this offseason for the Rebels down there in Oxford. Obviously, the big change, they have a first-round quarterback go out in Jackson Dart. They have two stellar running backs in Parrish and Bentley gone. Wide receiver core, you lose Harris and Watkins. At the offensive line, you lose Bulo, Calippo, James, and Scott. I think it was Scott that was the staple there. And then all four awesome defensive linemen. Most notable defensive tackle Nolan and defensive end Ivy. Those are big shoes to fill. Big old, really big shoe. I mean, defensive linemen, they're pretty big boys. And we'll see if they can replace them. And then at defensive back position, you got Amos and Washington. And then special teams. This is, I think, the only special teams one we put in for changes. They lose Davis, who scored a lot of points for them. A lot of people don't give kickers enough credit in general here in the game we call football. And he came up big, really big in their wins last season. Hopefully they are able to find a leg to replace him, because he was hitting some long ball, even though his transition outside of Ole Miss has not gone well because he's not signed to an NFL team. I'm kind of surprised about that. Maybe he'll spend the season with the UFL and then get a shot next year. Key players in the spread offense, because Lane Kiffin, just like Matt Campbell, great developer, great coach. I don't want to say simplifies the game, but just a great translator on what he wants to get done. and the new quarterback, Austin Simmons, who replaces Jackson Dart. I think we might have a little bit of the same, to be quite honest with you. He looked pretty solid in that game against Georgia, which they did win. He came in for some, I think it was that first series where they scored and led Ole Miss down the field. And you're like, that's not Jackson Dart on the field. How the hell, what? Ole Miss is moving the ball set, but you know, they did have all those stellar weapons. He's still going to have some awesome weapons that we're going to get into right now. At running back, you got Diggs, who was there on campus last year. He's going to finally get more touches. I think he will be more than adequate to get the same amount of numbers that Parrish and Bentley got. And then you have a guy that I overlooked when I was doing my previews, Taylor, who comes in from Troy. Troy lost. Troy's is losing quite a bit. We talked about King at right guard for North Carolina. We'll get into Penn State. There's another Troy player. This is another one. Obviously, we're talking about at running back Taylor, who might be one of those sleeper guys that you don't want to sleep on because he might be awesome. It's going to depend on the offensive line, which are going to be having some issues, I think, this season. They are having a ton of transfers coming through at that department. We'll see if Lane Kiffin, if Lane Kiffin's going to fail this season, it's not getting the right guys in the offensive line, unfortunately. They do have two right tackles that are now playing, right and left tackle that were going down with, one of them went down with injuries. That was another reason why I think Ole Miss didn't win the games that they should have last season, was just injuries in other places. That wasn't Jackson Dart and, Harris. But they do have a huge wide receiver haul. And it's headlined by Scribbling, who comes in from Oklahoma State, and then Wallace III, who's in from Penn State. They got some other guys also in there, but I think that's the reason why Ole Miss is going to be uber competitive, because Lane Kiffin, he's just a guy that knows how to translate really well. I think they even have a tight end that's coming in from the transfer portal. That should be pretty decent. We'll have to wait and see. 4-2-5 defense for Ole Miss. You have Perkins and Daughtry coming back, or Daughtry, how do we pronounce that? Those two guys were solid. That's kind of another reason why they are at 17. I think that linebacker pair is going to be one of the best in the SEC. They have a guy in front of them, more on the side of them, really. Womack, who comes in from LSU. I think he's going to be pretty solid. He replaces, Ivy and Unmen Melon. I can never pronounce that right. Defensive back, Gushkin, who comes in from the transfer portal out of Washington State. I think he's going to be pretty solid, even though he got mowed down by Genty when they played Boise State last year. And then Williams Jr. Out of UL Monroe. He had some pretty good production for the Warhawks. I was going to say the Hawks, but no, they're the Warhawks down there in UL Monroe. That's another area of concern. Just like the offensive line, a ton of transfers coming in the secondary for the Rebels. How's that transition happen? Then on top of that, to throw another monkey wrench into the gear, the guys that they're bringing in, they didn't play a lot of games last year, not because they weren't good enough, because of injuries. So we'll see if the injury bug hits them again, but in that department. Toughest games and weaknesses for Ole Miss. Kind of already talked about weaknesses technically, but we'll go back to it after we talked about the toughest games. They got six. And a lot of these are winnable games. And if they win a majority of them, I think it's understandable if they lose to like Georgia, South Carolina. But no, they should be winning Tulane, should be very close with LSU. And then they should get that game against the Sooners and Florida. But week 4, they got Tulane, which is at home. Tulane's just a competitive team, regardless of who they got. Summerall has done actually a pretty decent transition. They almost beat Kansas State last year. It was a very close game. Week 5, they got LSU. To me, Lane Kiffin done a pretty good job at defending home turf against the Tigers. Think they do it again, and have that nice back and forth for Ole Miss. I'm giving you an early prediction there. Georgia on the road week 8. That's probably the for sure loss, as we'll get into the predicted record that we're going to talk about. Week 9, right after that, they got to go on the road again against Oklahoma and Norman. It's going to be a tough one on the Palace on the Prairie. Week 10, back to back. 3 games, South Carolina. That one's at home. It's going to be a hard ass, contain Lenore Sellers, but we'll see if they can do it. And then week 12, everyone's talking about Florida being close to that top 10. We don't have them in the top 25, as you saw. But that should be a tough game towards the end of the season. They got the best of Ole Miss last year. There's some second half turnovers that put the game out of reach for Ole Miss, but they should be getting the job done. We're thinking 8-4, and that's pretty solid. I think that's going to actually maybe be spot on. Lane Kiffin's probably got these guys drilled down with his system, especially with the wide receivers. There's a reason why he attracted, I think it was like 6 receivers in the portal. It's like the guy puts up numbers, helps those guys put up numbers, transitions to the next level, which I think they're going to do pretty well on exposing a lot of teams through the air still with Austin Simmons there. And then the weaknesses, we talked about it with the secondary in containment. Are they going to let those balls in the seams get through? And are they going to have injury woes? Not just in that department, but just all around. I think that might be the thing that holds them back. If everything goes well, and this is not a weakness, this team could definitely be in playoff contention. I can very well see them win 10 games because it's Lane Kiffin. He's just a great mind, a great teacher of the game, and I think this post Nick Saban era, he's going to be one of those guys that probably wins a national championship. Yep, maybe if not for Ole Miss, but eventually. I think he's one of those guys. He's just really, really dedicated to the game we call football, and I can see it happen. Let's rewind and get into number 16. LSU. There we go. We got the slide there. Yeah. Again, riding on the wall. Brian Kelly, another year down in Baton Rouge. Off the bat, I'm just going to say the record 8-4. I think is the best they can do. They have one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. We haven't even talked about that yet. We're skipping a little bit in this section. But they lose quite a bit. So the changes for LSU, obviously the late great Kyron Lacey is gone. Mason Taylor also gone. He was just a great safety blanket for Garrett Nussmeier last season. They lose Williams in the backfield, even though they do have Caden Durham. We'll see who pairs with him this season. Excuse me. Defensive end, Swinson and Jones are also gone, and then there's some transfer portal guys that we have already technically have gotten to, or we'll get to here in a little bit for some other teams. Couple of DBs, Gilbert Burns out, but the biggest hole, massive hole gone for LSU is 4 guys on the offensive line. One was the first tackle off the draft board this past offseason in Campbell. You lose 2 guards in Frazier and Dellinger. And then you lose another tackle in Jones Jr., which means Chester is the only guy coming back for this 2025 season. And those are the guys that allowed Garrett Nussmeier to operate. We'll see how the transition happens, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in our top 25 offensive lines on Wednesday. For this offense, key players, obviously Garrett Nussmeier. We'll see how he survives. I think he might be the most sacked quarterback in college football, or at least in the SEC this season. we'll see how the transition happens as this program keeps rolling under Brian Kelly. We'll see if Brian Kelly can recruit properly and get guys through the portal, as I think that's kind of been an issue. Was a talking point a lot last season in the games that they lost. Just a lot of coming from other SEC fans and their own fans about how they just kind of look at like list and like, oh, let's just get that guy. But you know, they're pretty good guys. But again, Garrett Nussmeier, big guy coming back. Kenan Durham, you also see there on the screen. Solid guy, not just on the ground, but you know, that check down route, we should see a lot of it. Maybe some play designs with some screens as well. He absolutely obliterated UCLA when they came into the Death Valley last season with that big play as he goes into his true sophomore year. Aaron Anderson at wideout should be another high producer this season. On the offensive line, you know, you got Chester that's coming back. You have center coming in from Virginia Tech, Moore. And then at right guard from Northwestern, you got Thompson. Those guys, I don't know why they weren't earlier on labeled as starters, but that kind of transition already happened. But I was already like, those guys, why would you go? Why would you go from, I mean, obviously you want to leave VTech, but why would you go to LSU and then not be a starter against some of the guys that they have behind them? It kind of made no sense, but I was like, okay, well, I'll be proven right here in a little bit before the season started, and I was. So yeah, the interior should be decent. It's just going to be the tackle positions, which we'll talk about, I think, in the weaknesses. For the 4-3 defense, you have a pretty solid linebacker core. You got the Weeks brothers with Whit Weeks, one of the top producers on the defense, and then Perkins. We'll see if he can step up and be consistent. The defensive backs, you got Stamps, who I think it was tied in the country last year for passes defended. He should be pretty solid. Delane, also another Virginia Tech Hokie that comes in from the transfer portal. And then the last guy comes in from Florida, Pyburn, defensive end, pretty solid athlete. That's also another reason why we don't have the Gators ranked. We think they lost too many pieces to the portal to allow them to be a worthy. But yeah, he's going to be a great LSU Tiger. We'll see if he can replace Swinson Jones. As actually, the defensive line position was pretty weak for LSU last year, and getting that pickup should be good enough because that guy, pretty good sixth sense. The toughest games for the Bayou Bengals. Week 1, you got to go to the other Death Valley, and that'll be the winner of that one gets to call themselves the proper Death Valley, I guess. Against Clemson, not expecting them to win that one. Then they got Florida week 3. That's their first SEC game. You know, if they lose that one, it's gonna be downhill. It's gonna be a lot of downhill. They go to Ole Miss week 5. Kind of already talked about that with the Rebels at 17. Week 7, they got South Carolina. They do have a nice bye before that one. So, you know, injuries, preparation, that's all going to help out. But again, they got to beat and contain Lenore Sellers. That's just hard to ask. And then week 9, A&M. So it's kind of like week after week, some tough games really there. And then week 11, they got the game in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. My notes, I for some reason had that as a home game, but that's wrong. Another one where they have a nice bye, but that's usually every year they have a bye before Alabama. Week 14, this one just has to be on the list because Oklahoma by the end of the year should be lethal enough to make that a game, especially in Norman. That's the last game of the year for the Tigers. It's just a tough schedule, man. South Carolina is going to be tough. A&M is going to be tough. Bama, Ole Miss. I mean, you're not going to win the Clemson game. Oklahoma and Florida, you know, below tough. Maybe like, that's a really hard scratch. We'll see if they can handle it. Because of weaknesses, again, I think it's going to be the tackle positions. I know one of them has some starts under his belt. The other guy doesn't. I just don't remember the names off the top of my head right at the moment. But the bigger weaknesses outside of that is the coaching and management. I think coaching in the sense that like they're just kind of just leaning into talent. It doesn't seem like there's total development. Like the offensive line that we just talked about, that was so amazing. Those are all Coach Orgeron, recruits. None of those are Kelly guys. Most of the Kelly guys are, going to be this season and the next. And we're going to really see. I mean, hopefully Brian Kelly survives this season, because if it's not an 8-4 season and it's worse than that, he's gone. He is just going to be gone. I mean, he'll collect a nice check, but I don't think the boosters and the faithful out of Baton Rouge are going to deal with it much longer. And another issue, again, the management. Sloan and Hackton are going to have to do a really good job in pacing themselves in the passing game. They cannot have a lot of 3-and-outs, because Garrett Nussmeier is going to get probably not get the protection like last season, but he's going to have to get the ball out, and it's going to be more rush balls, and I think it's going to be even worse. Where like you see too many 3-and-outs, you give the other team more time to play with, especially if it's a team like Texas A&M that like to run the ball. You're going to have a lot of bad times there in Baton Rouge, I think. As